How much for this old thing?
Oh, I think it's marked at $10. We can do 5. The film you sold us, we found something disturbing. It looks like we have evidence of a major crime. This kitchen is minimalist. We simply don't have room for all this clutter. It has to go. How could you sell it? That bag was your grandmother's legacy. It was supposed to stay in the family.
I think this is him leaving the garage that night.
Oh, God, it's David. I knew it.
This is your last chance to cooperate. Don't disappoint me again.
I didn't even know my family had sold my old camera bag until a stranger called me and said, "Mom, the film inside it may show a crime." Rachel had laughed when she threw it into the sale pile. "It's just junk, Yvonne. No one uses film anymore." My own son didn't even look up from his phone. But that bag wasn't junk. It was the last piece of a life I had quietly buried. And now someone had developed the film. And whatever was on it was important enough to scare him. Important enough to find me. If you've ever had something taken from you like it meant nothing, I'd really like to hear your story. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if this story speaks to you, consider liking and subscribing, because some truths take years to come back, and when they do, they change everything. I used to believe that growing old meant becoming invisible, not all at once, not in some dramatic heartbreaking moment. It happened slowly, like a photograph fading in sunlight. Colours dull first, then details blur, and one day people stop seeing you altogether. That was my life inside Daniel's house. After my husband Thomas passed, Daniel insisted I move in with him and his wife Rachel. "It's safer, Mom," he had said. "You shouldn't be alone." At the time I thought it was love. Now I understand it was convenience. Their house was modern, spotless, and always just a little too quiet in the evenings. Rachel liked things a certain way. Clean lines, minimal clutter, no old junk. That was her favourite phrase. And unfortunately, I fell into that category. It started with small things. A box of my old letters disappeared one afternoon. I recycled them, Rachel said casually, not even looking up from her laptop. They were just taking up space. I remember standing there holding the empty shelf, trying to recall what had been inside that box. Birthday cards from Thomas. Notes Daniel had written me when he was a child. I hadn't realised how much I depended on those little pieces of memory until they were gone. "Next time, just ask me," I'd said quietly. Rachel finally looked at me, then her expression tight but polite. "Yvonne, if we asked you about everything, we'd never get anything done." Daniel didn't say a word. He never did when it mattered. That silence, it grew louder over time. Meals were another quiet reminder of where I stood. Rachel planned everything organic, measured, efficient. I offered once to cook. Just once. Something simple, something familiar. My husband used to say my pot roast could fix anything. Rachel smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That's sweet, but we're trying to eat healthier." After that, I stopped offering. I learned to stay out of the way. To fold myself smaller, like an old photograph tucked into a drawer no one opens anymore. But there was one thing I couldn't let go of. My camera bag. It wasn't even a particularly valuable one. Worn leather cracked along the edges with a stubborn zipper that only opened if you tugged it just right. But inside was my life. Film canisters carefully labelled in my handwriting. A few old lenses wrapped in soft cloth, and one last roll of undeveloped film. That roll had been with me for decades. I kept it hidden even from Thomas. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't trust what it represented. Some things are easier to carry when no one else knows they exist. Back then I worked in a small photo lab downtown. It was the kind of place people trusted with their memories. Weddings, birthdays, vacations, we saw everything. I wasn't a photographer in the glamorous sense, but I understood images. I understood what they could reveal and what they could hide. There's a difference between looking and seeing. Most people never learn it. I did. And once you learn it, you can't unsee certain things. That last roll of film, it wasn't like the others. I never labelled it, never developed it, just kept it tucked away in the inner pocket of my camera bag like a secret that had grown too heavy to face. Sometimes late at night I would take the bag out and hold it in my lap. I'd run my fingers over the leather, tracing the worn seams, remembering the person I used to be. Back when people listened to me. Back when I trusted my own instincts. Before fear had taught me silence. Are you going to keep that thing forever? Rachel's voice had startled me one afternoon as I sat in the living room, the bag resting on my knees. I looked up, blinking. I was just going through some old things. She crossed her arms, leaning against the doorway. Yvonne, we've talked about this. We need to declutter. That bag is falling apart. It still works, I said more defensively than I intended. For what, she asked, tilting her head. You don't even use it. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. She wasn't entirely wrong. I hadn't used it in years. But that didn't mean it was useless. Daniel walked in, just 10, loosening his tie. What's going on? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. She wasn't entirely wrong. I hadn't used it in years. But that didn't mean it was useless. Daniel walked in just then, loosening his tie. What's going on? Your mum is holding on to more stuff we don't need, Rachel replied. He glanced at the bag, then at me. Mum, maybe it's time to let some things go. It was such a simple sentence. So reasonable. So easy for him to say. I'm not ready, I whispered. Rachel sighed, pushing herself off the doorway. That's the problem, Yvonne. You're never ready. She walked away, her footsteps echoing softly down the hallway. Daniel lingered for a moment, shifting his weight. She's just trying to help, he said. I know, I replied, but that wasn't the truth. Helping doesn't feel like erasing. Helping doesn't feel like being slowly edited out of your own life. That evening I put the camera bag back in my closet. I tucked it behind a stack of old blankets, hidden but not forgotten. I remember hesitating before closing the door. A strange feeling settled in my chest, something uneasy like a warning I couldn't quite name. I almost took the bag back out. Almost. But I didn't. And a few days later it was gone. At first I thought I'd simply misplaced it, that maybe I'd moved it without remembering. I searched the closet, the spare room, even the garage. Nothing. Finally I asked, Daniel, have you seen my camera bag? He looked up from his phone, distracted. Which one? The brown one. Leather. I've had it for years. He frowned slightly, then glanced toward the kitchen where Rachel was loading the dishwasher. Oh, he said. Rachel included it in the garage sale last weekend. The words didn't make sense at first. Included it, I repeated. Yeah, he said casually. It was just sitting there. We figured you didn't need it anymore. Didn't need it. Just like that. No conversation. No question. A lifetime, the words didn't make sense at first. Included it, I repeated. Yeah, he said casually. It was just sitting there. We figured you didn't need it anymore. Didn't need it. Just like that. No conversation, no question, a lifetime reduced to something someone else could decide I didn't need. I I would have liked to be asked, said my voice trembling despite my effort to keep it steady. Daniel sighed, setting his phone down. Mom, it was just an old bag. Just an old bag. I felt something crack inside me then, not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet fracture deep enough that I knew it wouldn't heal the same way. Rachel walked in, drying her hands on a towel. Is this about the camera thing again? She asked. It wasn't just a thing, I said, looking at her. She met my gaze without flinching. Yvonne, we sold it for $20. Honestly, I'm surprised anyone even bought it. $20. I nodded slowly as if accepting the number might make it hurt less. But it didn't. Because it wasn't about the money, it was about what had been inside, and the fact that I hadn't even been given the chance to protect it. That night I sat alone in my room, staring at the empty space in my closet. For years I had kept that film hidden, buried, silent, and now it was out there, in someone else's hands. I didn't know who had it, I didn't know what they would do with it, but for the first time in decades I felt something stronger than fear. I felt a quiet rising certainty that whatever I had tried to keep hidden wasn't finished with me yet. The moment I said her name, Linda Bennett, something inside me shifted. It was as if the past, which I had carefully sealed away for decades, had finally broken through the surface. Not gently, not gradually, but all at once like a flood I could no longer hold back. Ethan didn't speak right away. He studied my face as if trying to understand not just what I was saying. AIDS had finally broken through the surface. Not gently, not gradually, but all at once like a flood I could no longer hold back. Ethan didn't speak right away. He studied my face as if trying to understand not just what I was saying, but what it cost me to say it. You're sure? He asked quietly. I nodded. I didn't recognize her back then, I said, not by name. She was just a woman in trouble. But now, I swallowed my throat tightening. I've seen her picture. In my house. Ethan frowned slightly. In your house? Yes, I said. Rachel has a framed photo. It sits on a shelf in the living room. She's mentioned her mother before, how she disappeared when Rachel was young. No answers. No closure. I looked down at the photograph in my hand again. That's her. A heavy silence settled between us. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. So the woman in these photos is your daughter-in-law's mother? Yes. And the man with her, Harold Bennett, I finished. Ethan's jaw tightened. He's still practicing law, isn't he? More than that, I said. He's built a reputation. Philanthropy. Public service. He's the kind of man people trust without question. Ethan let out a quiet breath. That makes this complicated. I almost laughed. Complicated, I echoed. No, Ethan. This is something else entirely. Because now it wasn't just about what I had seen. It was about what I had done. Or rather, what I had failed to do. The memories came back sharper than I expected. That night, I could see it clearly now. I had left the lab later than usual, my hands still smelling faintly of developer fluid. The air outside had been cool, the kind of quiet that settles over a city after most people have gone home. I remember adjusting the strap of my camera bag on my shoulder as I walked toward my car. And then I saw them. At first it didn't seem unusual, just two people in a parking lot talking, but something about the way she stood rigid guarded made me pause, and the way he moved too close, too controlling. I didn't think, I just reacted. I lifted my camera and took the first shot. The click of the shutter sounded louder than it should have in the stillness of the night. They didn't notice, so I took another, and another, each frame capturing something I didn't fully understand yet, but instinctively knew mattered. Then she turned. For a split second the light caught her face. Fear. Raw, unmistakable fear. That was when I should have stepped forward, said something, done something. But I didn't. I stayed hidden, watching, documenting, safe, until I wasn't. Because in that final moment he grabbed her, hard, and I froze. I didn't shout. I didn't run. I just stood there, my hands trembling around the camera, as if I had become part of the shadows myself. And then, it was over. He pushed her toward the car. The door slammed, and they were gone. Just like that. I remember standing there long after the sound of the engine faded, telling myself I would report it, that I would do the right thing. Tomorrow, always tomorrow. I was a coward, I said softly, staring at the table. Ethan shook his head. You were scared. That's the same thing, I replied. No, he said firmly. It isn't. I looked up at him, surprised by the certainty in his voice. You took those photos, he continued. That wasn't nothing. That was instinct. That was courage, at least the beginning of it. The beginning isn't enough, I said. Sometimes it is, he replied, especially if it leads to the truth later. I wanted to believe him, but the weight I had carried all these years didn't loosen so easily. You don't understand, I said. I tried to do more. His expression softened. Tell me. I hesitated. Even now the memory of what happened after that night made my stomach twist. I developed the film the next morning, I said. I stayed late at the lab so no one would see. When the images appeared, I knew. Knew what? That it wasn't just an argument. That something was wrong. I took a breath. I wrote everything down. The time, the location, what I saw. I even made copies of the prints. I was going to take them to the police that afternoon. What changed? I wrote everything down. The time, the location, what I saw. I even made copies of the prints. I was going to take them to the police that afternoon. What changed? Ethan asked. I closed my eyes briefly. The knock on the door. It had come just after noon. I remember the sound vividly. Not loud, not aggressive, but deliberate. When I opened the door, the man standing there didn't look threatening. That was the worst part. He was calm, well-dressed, polite. Mrs. Whitman, he had asked. Yes, I replied, my heart already beginning to race. He smiled slightly. May I come in? I didn't want to let him. but something about the way he stood there so certain, so composed, made it feel less like a request and more like a formality. I stepped aside. He walked in, glancing around my small living room as if committing every detail to memory. Then he turned to me. "You took some photographs last night," he said. Not a question, a statement. I felt the blood drain from my face. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. He smiled again. "You're a very observant woman, Mrs. Whitman," he said. "That's a rare quality." My hands began to shake. "How do you?" He raised a hand, gently stopping me. "Some moments," he said, "are not meant to be captured." The room felt smaller suddenly, harder to breathe. "I was going to report," I started. "Of course you were," he interrupted smoothly. "You're a good person." He stepped closer, not aggressively, but close enough that I could smell his cologne. "Which is why I'm here," he continued, "to help you make the right decision." My throat tightened. "And what is that?" I whispered. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, "To forget what you saw." I remember shaking my head. "I can't." "Yes," he said, his tone still calm, still measured. "You can." His eyes didn't leave mine. "Because accidents happen, Mrs. Whitman," he said. "People lose jobs, people lose homes, sometimes people lose much more than that." A cold fear settled deep in my chest. "You have a son," he added softly. "Daniel, isn't it?" That was when everything changed, because it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about him, my boy, my reason for every choice I'd ever made. "I'm not asking you to lie," the man continued. "I'm asking you to let things be as they are." Silence filled the room. Heavy, crushing. Some truths he said only cause harm, and then he left. Just like that. No threats shouted, no violence, just certainty and fear. I burned the report that night. I said, my voice barely audible. Ethan didn't interrupt. I kept the film I added. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me couldn't let go completely. I looked at him. I told myself I was protecting my family. He nodded slowly, but now he asked. I took a deep breath. Now the truth felt different, heavier, but also clearer. Now I said, I think I was protecting the wrong people. The words hung in the air between us. Because for the first time in decades, I wasn't just remembering what happened. I was ready to face it. When I got home that afternoon, the house felt different. Not quieter, not louder, just colder. Like something had shifted beneath the surface, and even the walls could feel it. Rachel was in the living room when I walked in, sitting stiffly on the couch, her laptop open but untouched. Daniel stood near the window, his back to me, arms crossed tightly over his chest. They both looked up at the same time, and for a moment no one spoke. "I need to talk to you," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Rachel closed her laptop slowly. About what I stepped further into the room, clutching the envelope Ethan had given me. About the camera bag, I said. Her expression hardened immediately. "Yvonne, we've already been through this." "It wasn't just a bag," I interrupted. That caught her off guard. Daniel turned slightly, glancing at me over his shoulder. "Mum." There was something inside it. I continued, my heart pounding. Something important. Something I didn't tell you about. Rachel stood up now, arms crossing defensively. "This better not be another one of your sentimental stories. It's about your mother." The words landed like a crack through glass. Rachel froze. Daniel turned fully toward me. "What did you just say?" Rachel asked, her voice sharp, almost brittle. I took a breath. "The film in that bag, it has photographs. From years ago. The night your mother disappeared." Rachel stared at me, her face pale but tense, like she was bracing herself against something she refused to believe. "No," she said immediately. "No, that's not possible." "I've seen them," I said. "I was there, you were there." Daniel repeated, confusion creeping into his voice. "I didn't know who she was at the time," I explained quickly, "but I saw what happened. I took pictures. And now, they've been developed." Rachel let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "This is ridiculous," she said. "My mother's case was investigated. There was nothing. No witnesses, no evidence." "There is now," I said, quietly. I opened the envelope and pulled out the photographs, laying them carefully on the coffee table between us. Rachel didn't move at first. Then slowly, reluctantly, she stepped closer. Her eyes dropped to the first image, then the second, and the third. I watched her face as recognition began to creep in, not all at once, but piece by piece. Confusion, doubt, and then something deeper. Fear. She picked up one of the photos with trembling fingers. That's not," she started, but her voice faltered. Daniel leaned in beside her, his brow furrowed. Who is that? He asked. Rachel didn't answer, because she already knew. This is some kind of mistake, she said finally, her voice rising. This has to be manipulated. Fake. It isn't, I said. The film has been authenticated. The images are real. And you expect me to believe that you just happened to be there? Rachel snapped her composure, cracking. And you never said anything. Not once in all these years. Her words hit harder than I expected. Because they weren't just questions. They were accusations. I was afraid, I said. Rachel let out a bitter laugh. Afraid my mother disappeared. Yvonne, do you have any idea what that did to my family? To me I do, I said softly. And I'm sorry. Sorry I was afraid, I said. Rachel let out a bitter laugh. I'm afraid my mother disappeared. Yvonne, do you have any idea what that did to my family? To me I do, I said softly. And I'm sorry. Sorry, she repeated, her voice sharp enough to cut. You think sorry fixes this? Daniel stepped in, then his voice tense. Rachel, let's just... No, she snapped, turning on him. Don't tell me to calm down. Not about this. She turned back to me, her eyes blazing now. If this is true, if any of this is real, then you let it happen, she said. You saw something and you did nothing. The room went silent, because deep down I had already said those same words to myself. I thought I was protecting my family, I whispered. Rachel shook her head slowly, disbelief etched into every line of her face. No, she said. You were protecting yourself. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his expression conflicted. Mum, why didn't you come forward later? He asked. After things settled down, I swallowed hard. I was threatened, I said. A man came to my house. He knew about the photos. He knew about you, Daniel. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. Me? Yes, I said. He made it very clear that if I spoke up, there would be consequences. Rachel scoffed. That's convenient. It's the truth, I said firmly. Or maybe she shot back, you're just trying to make yourself feel better. That's enough, Daniel said suddenly, his voice sharper than before. Rachel turned to him, stunned. You're defending her, she demanded. I'm saying we don't know everything yet, he replied. I know enough, she said, her voice trembling now not with anger but with something deeper. I know my mother is gone. I know no one ever came forward. And now suddenly your mother claims she had the answer all along. I didn't have the answer, I said quietly. I had a piece of it, and I was too afraid to use it. Rachel stared at me for a long moment, then she placed the photograph back on the table, her movements slow and deliberate. You don't get to rewrite this, she said. You don't get to walk in here decades later and pretend like you're some kind of hero. I'm not trying to be a hero, I said. Good, she replied coldly. Because you're not. The words settled heavily in the room. Daniel looked between us, his face drawn with tension. What are you planning to do with this? He asked me. I met his gaze. I'm going to the police, I said. Rachel's head snapped up. No, you're not. Yes, I said. I am. You can't just... She started, but her voice broke. I saw it then. Not just anger, not just resentment, but fear. Because if what I was saying was true, it meant everything she had believed about her mother's disappearance was wrong. And that kind of truth doesn't just change the past, it destroys the version of it you've been living with. This will reopen everything, she said, her voice quieter now. The case, the investigation, the questions. I know, I said. And what if it goes nowhere, she pressed. What if it just drags everything up again and leaves us with nothing? I took a step closer. What if it doesn't, I asked. Silence. Because that was the real question, wasn't it? Not whether the truth would hurt, but whether it was worth the risk. Rachel shook her head slowly, backing away from the table. I can't do this, she said. I can't go through this again. You don't have to, I replied gently. But you do, she shot back. I hesitated, because the answer was yes. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Yes, I said finally. Daniel exhaled slowly, his shoulders sagging. Mum, this is going to change everything, he said. I nodded. I know. Rachel turned away, wrapping her arms around herself as if trying to hold something together inside her. Do whatever you want, she said quietly. You always do, apparently. The bitterness in her voice stung more than the anger had. But I didn't argue, because for the first time in years I wasn't trying to defend myself. I was trying to do something I should have done a long time ago, even if it cost me everything. As I gathered the photographs back into the envelope, I felt the weight of them differently now. Not just as evidence, but as a responsibility, a chance, and maybe the last one I would ever get. The police station smelled the same as it had decades ago, sterile, faintly metallic, like everything inside it had been scrubbed clean of emotion. I stood just inside the entrance for a moment, clutching the envelope in my hands, my fingers pressing into the edges, hard enough to leave marks. For years this place had represented something simple to me. Safety. Now it felt like a test. "Can I help you, Mum?" The voice pulled me out of my thoughts. A young officer stood behind the front desk, watching me with polite curiosity. "Yes," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "I need to speak to someone about an old case." He nodded. "Do you have a name or file number?" I hesitated. "Linda Bennett," I said. Something flickered across his face, recognition maybe, or just the weight of a name that had been filed away but never forgotten. "One moment," he said, reaching for the phone. As he spoke quietly into the receiver, I felt my heartbeat begin to quicken. This was real. There was no turning back now. Detective Carla Ruiz met me in a small interview room. She was sharp-eyed, composed, the kind of person who didn't miss much. There was a steadiness to her that made me both nervous and strangely reassured. "You're Yvonne Whitman," she said, sitting across from me. "Yes. You mentioned the Bennett case." I did. She leaned back slightly, studying me. "That case is over 25 years old," she said. "We don't usually get new information on something that old. Not credible information anyway." Her tone wasn't dismissive, just careful. "I understand," I said, "but I have something you need to see." I slid the envelope across the table. She opened it slowly, pulling out the photographs one by one. I watched her face as she examined them. At first it was neutral, professional. Then gradually it changed. Her eyes sharpened. Her posture straightened. "Where did you get these?" she asked. "I took them," I said. She looked up at me. "When the night Linda Bennett disappeared." The room went very still. Detective Ruiz set the photographs down carefully, as if they had suddenly become something fragile or dangerous. "Start from the beginning," she said. So I did. I told her everything. The lab, the parking lot, the photographs, the man who came to my house, the threats, the silence. I didn't leave anything out, not this time. When I finished, the silence that followed felt different, heavier, but also clearer. Detective Ruiz exhaled slowly, her fingers tapping lightly against the table. "If this is accurate," she said, "this changes everything." "I know," I replied. She picked up one of the photos again, studying Harold Bennett's face. "He's still practicing," she said. "Respected, connected." "Yes. That makes this complicated." I almost smiled. Ethan had said the same thing. "Yes," I said. "It does." She looked back at me. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come forward after all this time?" The question didn't sting to this time. The question didn't sting to the way I expected it to. "Maybe because I already knew the answer. Because I don't want to be afraid anymore," I said. She held my gaze for a moment longer. Then she nodded. "All right," she said. "Here's what's going to happen. The way I expected it to. Maybe because I already knew the answer. Because I don't want to be afraid anymore," I said. She held my gaze for a moment longer. Then she nodded. "All right," she said. "Here's what's going to happen." By the time I left the station, the world outside felt sharper, brighter. Like everything had been pulled into focus, but the clarity came with a cost. Because now it wasn't just my story anymore. It was public. Within 2 days, everything exploded. News outlets picked it up first. New evidence emerges in decades-old disappearance. Prominent attorney linked to cold case. And then my name. Witness comes forward after 25 years. I saw my face on the television that evening, sitting in the corner of the living room like something I didn't quite recognize. Rachel turned it off immediately. "This is exactly what I didn't want," she said, her voice tight. Daniel stood beside her, his expression strained. "Mom, they're saying you waited decades," he said. "They're questioning your credibility." "I expected that," I replied. Rachel let out a bitter laugh. "Of course you did, because this isn't about the truth, it's about you trying to fix your guilt." "That's not fair," Daniel said, though his voice lacked conviction. "No," Rachel snapped. "What's not fair is dragging my mother's name through this again with no guarantee of anything." I looked at her. "I'm not dragging her name through anything," I said. "I'm trying to give her a voice." "She had a voice," Rachel shot back, "and no one listened." The words hit harder than anything she had said before. Because she was right. For years no one had listened, not even me. The pressure built quickly. Reporters began calling the house. Strangers left messages, some supportive, others cruel. "Why didn't you speak sooner? Are you making this up? Is this for attention?" I learned quickly that when you tell the truth, people don't always want to hear it, especially when it arrives late. One evening I found a note slipped under the front door. No name, no signature. Just a single sentence. Some things should stay buried. My hands trembled as I held it, because the past wasn't just watching anymore, it was pushing back. Detective Ruiz called me the next morning. "We've reopened the case, Washaba," she said. My heart skipped. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means we're investigating Bennett," she replied, formally. I sat down slowly, the weight of her words settling over me. "And the photos?" I asked. "We're having them analysed," she said, "but preliminary reports suggest they're authentic. The film stock, the aging, the chemical composition, it all lines up with the timeline you provided." I closed my eyes briefly. For the first time, there was proof, real proof. "Yvonne," she said, her tone shifting slightly, "I need to prepare you for something." "What?" "This is going to get worse before it gets better." I let out a quiet breath. "I figured as much. Bennett has resources," she continued. "Connections, lawyers. He's going to fight this." "I know. And he's going to come after your credibility," she added. "Your memory, your character. Everything." A small bitter smile touched my lips. "They've already started," I said. She didn't respond right away. "Do you regret coming forward?" she asked finally. I thought about it. About Rachel's anger, Daniel's uncertainty, the whispers, the doubt, the fear that had followed me all these years now standing right in front of me again. And then I thought about Linda, about the look on her face in that photograph, about the moment I had chosen silence. "No," I said. My voice was steady now, stronger than it had been in a long time. "I regret waiting." The line was quiet for a moment. Then Detective Reese said, "Good." Because for the first time in decades, I wasn't hiding anymore, and whatever came next, I was ready to face it. The courtroom felt colder than I expected, not because of the temperature, but because of the weight in the air. The kind that settles over a room when people know something serious is about to unfold, but no one knows exactly how it will end. I sat quietly beside Detective Ruiz, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Across the room, Harold Bennett looked exactly as I remembered, composed, confident, untouchable. He wore a dark suit, perfectly tailored, his posture straight, as if he had nothing to fear. And maybe for most of his life he hadn't. But today was different, because today he was no longer just a respected attorney. He was a man under suspicion. Rachel sat several rows behind me. She hadn't spoken to me since the night I told her I was going to the police, but she had come. That mattered more than she probably realized. Daniel sat beside her, his expression tense, his eyes moving constantly between me and Bennett. I wondered what he was thinking, if he was still unsure, or if he was starting to see the truth for what it was. "Ms. Whitman." The voice pulled me forward. I looked up. "It's time." My heart pounded as I stood. This was it. No more silence. No more hiding. Taking the stand felt surreal, like stepping into someone else's life. I raised my hand, took the oath, and sat down, my eyes briefly scanning the room before settling straight ahead. The prosecutor approached first. "Ms. Whitman," she said gently, "can you tell the court where you were on the night of October 12th, 26 years ago?" The date hit me harder than I expected. So many years. And yet it still felt close. "I was leaving work," I said, "at a photography lab downtown." And what happened next, I took a breath. I saw two people in the parking lot, a man and a woman. They appeared to be arguing. "Did you recognize them at the time?" "No." "What did you do?" "I took photographs," I said. "Several of them." She nodded. "Why?" "Because something felt wrong," I said simply. The courtroom was silent, every eye on me. "Can you describe what you saw?" she asked. I swallowed. "The woman looked afraid," I said. "The man was controlling, aggressive. In the final moments he grabbed her arm and forced her toward a car." A murmur rippled through the room. The prosecutor held up one of the photographs. "Is this one of the images you took that night?" "Yes." "And do you recognize the individuals in this photograph now?" I turned my head slightly, looking at the image. Then I lifted my gaze and pointed. "That is Harold Bennett," I said. A sharp tension filled the room. Bennett didn't react, not outwardly, but I saw it. The slight tightening of his jaw, the smallest shift in his composure. "And the woman," the prosecutor asked. My voice softened. "That is Linda Bennett." Rachel's breath caught behind me. I heard it, felt it. But I didn't turn around, not yet. "Ms. Whitman," the prosecutor continued, "why didn't you come forward at the time?" The question hung in the air, the one everyone wanted answered. I closed my eyes briefly, then opened them again. "Because I was afraid," I said. "Afraid of what?" "Of what would happen if I spoke," I replied. "A man came to my home. He knew about the photographs. He made it clear that my family could be harmed. Did you believe him?" "Yes." And so you remain silent? Yes. The prosecutor nodded slowly. No further questions. The defense attorney stood. He was older, polished, the kind of man who knew exactly how to turn doubt into something sharp. Ms. Whitman, he began, his tone almost friendly. You've had over 2 decades to come forward with this information. Why now? Because the evidence resurfaced, I said, and you expect this court to believe that you simply forgot about it until now. I didn't forget, I replied. I buried it. A few people shifted in their seats. The attorney smiled slightly. Convenient, he said. Would you agree that memories can fade over time? Yes, I said. And that details can become distorted. Yes. So it's possible, he continued, that what you think you saw isn't entirely accurate. Convenient, he said. Would you agree that memories can fade over time? Yes, I said. And that details can become distorted. Yes. So it's possible, he continued, that what you think you saw isn't entirely accurate. I met his gaze. No, I said. The word came out stronger than I expected. Why not, he pressed. Because I didn't rely on memory, I said. I relied on photographs. A pause. The attorney adjusted his stance slightly. Photographs that conveniently reappeared after decades, he said. They didn't reappear, I replied. They were always there, hidden, he said. Yes, by you. Yes, and yet you want this court to trust your judgment. I felt something shift inside me then. Not fear, not hesitation, something steadier. I don't expect the court to trust my judgment, I said. I expect it to examine the evidence. The room grew quiet again. The attorney's smile faded slightly. Let's talk about your fear, he said. You claim someone threatened you. Do you have any proof of that? No, I said. So we're expected to take your word for it? Yes. He nodded, as if satisfied. And you're certain that fear didn't influence what you think you saw, no? I said again. Or what you believe now, he added. I leaned forward slightly. For 26 years, I said, I lived with the weight of what I didn't do. That doesn't make my memory weaker. I paused. It makes it clearer. The courtroom was completely still now. The attorney studied me for a moment longer. Then he stepped back. No further questions. When I stepped down from the stand, my legs felt unsteady, but my mind was calm. For the first time in decades, I had said everything out loud. Every truth, every fear, every mistake. And somehow I was still standing. Rachel was waiting in the hallway. She didn't speak at first. She just looked at me, really looked at me. Like she was seeing me for the first time. You were there, she said, finally. Yes. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. Why didn't you tell me, she asked, her voice quieter now. I didn't know it was your mother, I said. Not back then. And later I hesitated. Later I didn't know how I admitted. She nodded slowly. That doesn't make it okay, she said. I know. A long silence passed between us. Then unexpectedly she said, but it makes it human. The words settled between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something closer than we had been in a long time. I don't know what happens next, she said. Neither do I replied. She looked past me back toward the courtroom. But I want to know the truth, she said. I nodded. So do I. And for the first time, we were on the same side. The verdict came 3 days later. 3 days that felt longer than the 26 years I had spent carrying the truth. I sat in the courtroom again, my hands folded in my lap, but this time they were steady. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because there was nothing left to hide. Rachel sat beside me. Not behind me. Beside me. We hadn't spoken much since the day I testified, but something between us had changed. Not completely healed, not even close, but no longer broken in the same way. Daniel sat on Rachel's other side, quieter than I had ever seen him. He hadn't tried to defend me again, but he hadn't turned away either. Sometimes, that's how people begin to come back. Harold Bennett stood at the front of the courtroom. For the first time, he didn't look untouchable. He looked tired, smaller somehow, like the weight of everything he had hidden for so long was finally pressing down on him. The judge entered. Everyone stood. And just like that, it began. The words themselves were formal, measured, carefully chosen, but their meaning was unmistakable. Guilty. The room seemed to exhale all at once, a sound that wasn't quite relief and wasn't quite grief, just release. I didn't move at first, didn't speak, didn't even breathe, because I needed to hear it again, to be sure it was real. Harold Bennett was taken into custody without resistance. No dramatic outburst, no denial, just a quiet collapse of the image he had built for himself. As they led him past us, his eyes flickered in my direction. For a brief moment they met mine, and I saw something I had never seen before. Not power, not confidence, fear, the same fear I had carried for so many years. Only now it belonged to him. Rachel didn't cry right away. She sat perfectly still, her hands resting in her lap, her eyes fixed on the space where Bennett had been standing. Then slowly her shoulders began to shake. I turned toward her instinctively, not knowing if I should reach out, not knowing if I had the right. But she made the decision for me. She leaned into me, and suddenly she was crying. Not quietly, not carefully, but completely. All the years of unanswered questions, all the nights without closure, all the anger she had carried with nowhere to put it, it all came out at once. I didn't know, she whispered through tears. I didn't know what happened to her. I know, I said softly. I thought she left us, Rachel continued, her voice breaking. I thought she chose to disappear. My heart ached hearing that, because the truth was so much heavier than that. She didn't leave, I said gently. She was taken from you. Rachel nodded against my shoulder, her grip tightening slightly. I was so angry at you, she admitted. I thought you were lying or trying to make it about yourself. That's okay, I said. No, she said quickly, pulling back just enough to look at me. It's not. Her eyes were red but steady now. I was wrong, she said. About you. I shook my head. I should have told someone, I said. A long time ago. She studied me for a moment. Then she said something I didn't expect. But you didn't run this time. The words settled between us. Simple. But true. And somehow enough. Daniel approached slowly as if unsure where he belonged in the moment. Mum, he said quietly. I turned to him. I'm sorry, he added. 2 words. But they carried years of distance. Years of silence. I should have listened, he said. I should have asked questions instead of just assuming. I nodded. Maybe I said. He looked down briefly, then back at me. But I didn't, he said. There was no excuse in his voice, no defense, just honesty. And that mattered. We're here now, I said. It wasn't forgiveness, not completely, but it was a beginning. The weeks that followed were quieter. Not easier, but quieter. The media attention faded gradually, replaced by newer stories, newer headlines. But for us, everything had changed. Rachel visited her mother's case file. Not alone. She asked me to go with her. We sat together in a small records room, flipping through pages that had once been filled with nothing but questions. Now they held answers, not perfect ones, not enough to erase the pain, but enough to give shape to it, enough to let it rest. I used to imagine what she might say to me, Rachel said one afternoon, her voice soft as she looked at an old photograph of her mother. What do you think she'd say now, I asked. She smiled faintly. I think she'd say to stop looking backward, she said, and start living forward. I nodded. That sounds like her, I said. Even though I had only seen Linda Bennett for a few moments, I believed it. I moved out a month later. Not because I was asked to, but because I needed to. The house had never really felt like mine. And now I wanted something different out like mine. And now I wanted something that was. Daniel helped me find a small apartment not far from where I used to work. It wasn't large or modern, but it was quiet, and it was mine. Rachel came by one afternoon with a box. I found these, she said, setting it down on the table. Inside were a few of the things that hadn't been sold. Old photographs, letters, pieces of a life that had almost been erased. Thank you, I said. She hesitated for a moment. Then she added, I didn't realize how much those things mattered. I looked at her. Most people don't, I said. She nodded. Then after a pause, she said, I'd like to learn. It wasn't a grand apology, but it was real. And that was enough. One evening I sat by the window with my old camera in my hands. Ethan had managed to track it down. The person who bought it had been willing to return it after hearing the story. The leather was still worn, the zipper still stubborn, but it felt different now. Not like a burden, not like a secret, but like something reclaimed. I lifted it, looking through the viewfinder. The world outside framed itself into something clear, something honest. For the first time in years I pressed the shutter. The soft click echoed in the quiet room, and instead of fear I felt peace, because the truth had finally found its way out, and so had I.